Lonely Lumberjack took in a pregnant girl, sold by her brother. What he found was more than a family. The snow fell in thick, silent sheets across the barren land of Montana. White swallowed brown, ice covered rot, and at the edge of a frostbitten cattle yard, a young woman stood shackled to a wagon like a mule bound for slaughter. Her name was June, 22, belly round with life, lips cracked from cold. Her brother stood a few feet away, negotiating with a rancher who smelled of whiskey and leather. In hers, nothing but rusted chains and the steady pulse of a child not yet born. "She's healthy," her brother said, voice dry. "Strong legs, does not talk much. 7 months, but the baby will come clean." The rancher looked her up and down with dead eyes. "And she don't run." "She won't," her brother grinned. "Not anymore." That was when it happened. A sudden, sharp kick from inside her belly. Not the usual flutters. Not the slow rolls of a growing child. No, this was a jolt, powerful and urgent, like a fist knocking from the inside out. June's breath caught. Her spine stiffened. Another kick. And another. It was not pain. It was demand. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I hear you, baby. I hear you. And I swear I won't let them sell you too." Snow clung to her lashes. Wind burned her cheeks. The wagon creaked under weight as the rancher prepared to haul her back to his land. Chains scraped as she was yanked toward the rear. Her brother did not look back. The Colt gleamed in his hand, cold metal warm with triumph. He waited until the wagon wheel hit a stump. Just enough of a jolt, just enough of a shift. Then June moved. She twisted hard, slamming her shoulder into the man beside her. The chain cracked as it caught against a rail. The rancher cursed. She rolled, feet hitting the snow, knees buckling, body falling. Down, into white, into cold, into freedom. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Her belly hit first. Pain lanced up her side. But she was up before they could scream. Limping, bleeding, running. Oh. Behind her, men shouted, boots crunched, but she did not stop. Branches slapped her face. Ice sliced her skin. The world became a blur of gray and red in the high-pitched ring of fear. Her breath tore through her throat. Blood dotted the snow, bright against pale ground. Her boots were soaked, her coat thin, her body fragile. But she ran, because inside her was someone else. And that someone was not for sale. She could feel it, the heartbeat that was not hers, pounding with hers like a twin drum. The baby did not cry, but she felt it reach through her fear. A presence, a push, a will. "Run, Mama, run!" So she did. Through pine trees older than history, past crows who did not bother to scatter, over ridges no human foot had touched that winter. Her lungs burned, her knees screamed, her arms clutched her belly like a shield. No one had ever protected her. Not her father, long dead from a bottle, not her mother, buried with sadness, and certainly not her brother, now trading her body for a weapon. But she could protect this child, even if it killed her. Twilight fell. Snow deepened. The wind howled low and long like a wolf hunting alone. Her pace slowed, her vision blurred, her fingers lost feeling. Still, she pressed on. Then her foot slipped. She tumbled down a short ravine, landing on her side in a drift so deep it swallowed half her body. The cold knocked her silent. For a moment she could not move, she could not think. And then another kick, softer this time, not urgent, not afraid, just present. "I'm here," she whispered. Her lips were blue, her voice cracked. "We're still here." She clawed forward, dragging herself through snow. Trees circled, shadows crept, until finally, there. A light, small, faint, but steady. It flickered through the woods, just above the ridge. A cabin maybe, a fire perhaps, a chance. June did not smile, she did not cry, she just moved, slow, one breath at a time, one prayer with every inch. Behind her, the snow kept her secrets, for now. And ahead, warmth, or death. But she would take either, so long as it was not a cage. She pressed her hand to her stomach again. The baby was quiet now, still, trusting. "Hold on, little one," she whispered through the dark. "Mama's not done yet." The wind shifted just after dusk. Thomas froze mid-swing, axe halfway through a log of pine. He tilted his head, listening. Years alone in the woods had sharpened his senses beyond the needs of speech. The sound was faint, ragged breathing, and something softer beneath it. He dropped the axe. Moving quickly, Thomas slipped through the tree line, boots crunching lightly over snow. A lifetime of silence made him a shadow. He followed the broken branches and a whisper of blood on the snow. Not animal. Then he saw her, crumbled in the snow like a broken sparrow. One hand curled protectively over her belly. Her lips were blue, her hair matted with ice. Blood had crusted along her temple. The child within her was obvious. 7 months, maybe 8. Still, her body curled as if she could shield the unborn with sheer will. She opened her eyes. They barely focused, but her mouth formed a single word. "Help!" Thomas crouched, studied her. His brow furrowed, not in confusion, but calculation. Snow had half covered her already. Wolves would find her before dawn, or the cold would. Either way, she would not make it on her own. He stood up straight, scanning the trees. Tracks. Multiple boots, heavier than hers. Deep heel prints. Men with weight. Possibly horses nearby. They would come looking. He moved fast. He snatched up pine branches, dragging them behind him to sweep over the blood trail. He kicked snow across every footprint she left, one by one, looping the path to confuse the direction. In the brush behind her, he dug out a snare trap, quick and clean. Not for animals, for men. If they followed, they would limp back. He returned to her. She had stopped shivering. Thomas sighed through his nose. Then, without a word, he bent down and lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light, but her breath still came, soft and faint. "Damn waste," he muttered. "Freezing to death with a baby. What kind of idiot leaves you out here?" He adjusted her weight against his chest, then started walking. His cabin was a half-mile east, hidden in a thicket of evergreens and draped in snow. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney, it only burned when needed. He had not expected to use fire again this week. When they arrived, he kicked the door open with one boot, careful not to jostle her too much. Inside, he lowered her onto a cot beside the stove. The room smelled of pine tar, old wool, and iron, clean, though bare. Thomas moved without pause. He stoked the embers in the stove, layered it with fresh logs, and lit the fire. Warmth crawled out across the floor like a waking beast. He took off her wet boots, set them near the hearth, then wrapped a thick fur over her legs. Her fingers were ice. He tucked them beneath the blanket with careful pressure. Only then did he speak again. "I don't feed strays," he muttered, half to himself. "I don't take in folks. But dying out there in my woods, that'd be a waste of good snow." He sat across from her and watched as color slowly returned to her face. Her breaths grew steadier. A flicker of something like peace settled in the furrow of her brow. He stared at the fire. It crackled, orange and gold, licking the iron belly of the stove. He remembered another fire, years ago, a different night, screaming, smoke, his daughter's small fingers slipping from his grasp in a burning doorway. He had not lit a fire for anyone since. Now he stoked it again, for a woman he did not know, for a child he had never seen. He reached for the kettle, filled it with snow, and set it on the stove to melt. Outside, the wind howled like something ancient and unforgiving, but inside, the cabin pulsed with warmth, an old warmth, a dangerous one. The woman slept, lips parted, hair damp but thawing. Thomas said nothing more, but as he watched the fire burn, his eyes stayed on her belly, not out of curiosity, but out of obligation, because whatever she was running from had no place here, and whatever came next, he would face it. Quietly, with axe or flame, because for the first time in years he had lit a fire not just to survive, but to keep someone else alive. June woke to the crackle of fire and the scent of pine wood smoke. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The world was quiet, still, and strangely soft. She blinked, head sinking into a pillow stuffed with straw and old wool. Her fingers curled around a blanket draped across her lap, heavy, coarse, but warm. She sat up slowly. The cabin was small, compact. Every item in it had been placed with function, not charm. A low shelf held tin mugs, a kettle, and a bundle of dried herbs. Beside the stove sat a pot of stew, steam still rising. A wooden spoon rested next to it. A small candle flickered on a table. And near the hearth, cradled in a corner like a secret, stood a wooden cradle, simple, old, hand-carved. Her breath caught. The cradle was not new. One leg had been mended. But it had been placed with care, angled to catch the fire's warmth, its interior lined with a folded quilt. She looked down at her own belly, swollen beneath the borrowed shirt. The baby kicked once, soft, present. She whispered, "We're safe." Thomas was not there, but his presence lingered in every rough-edged kindness. A wooden comb lay beside the candle. She ran her fingers along its spine. It had been sanded smooth. A leather strap hung by the door, likely for her boots, now drying nearby. And beside the pot of stew, a folded scrap of paper held one line, in rough, squared handwriting. "Don't burn the stew, and don't lift anything heavy. Your belly's big as a grain barrel." June smiled. It came unexpectedly, like warmth breaking through frost. Later that day, Thomas returned, carrying 2 bundles of firewood on one shoulder. He nodded at her without ceremony. "You're up." "I am good." He set the wood down by the stove. She watched him as he moved, efficient, precise, like a man who had learned to waste nothing. His beard was thick, his flannel shirt patched at the elbow, and his boots left tracks of snow that melted in slow puddles on the wood floor. "Only home, I don't know how to thank you," she said quietly. "Don't. I mean it. I don't do things to be thanked," he muttered, pulling off his gloves. "You needed heat, that's all." She nodded. He grabbed the stew pot, sniffed it, then added more salt. "Eat while it's hot." When she reached for a bowl, he paused. "Not that one. The blue one's lighter, less to carry." June blinked. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" He grunted, ladling soup. She sat at the small table, sipping slowly. The warmth filled her chest and belly like something holy. Thomas didn't sit. He moved around the room, checking shutters, adjusting the fire. Always moving. As her eyes drifted across the cabin, something on the mantel caught her attention. A carved frame, uneven, delicate, clearly handmade. Inside, no photograph, just a name etched in soft, looping script, Ellie. She looked up. "Your daughter?" Thomas froze mid-step. For a second, his jaw tensed. Then, "Yes." "She's not here?" "She was. Long time ago," he exhaled. "Fire took her. House didn't stand much longer after that." June's hands went still on the bowl. "I'm sorry." He nodded once. "Me too." She rose slowly, walked over to the cradle by the fire, ran a hand along its edge. "This was hers?" "Yes." Silence stretched between them, not heavy, just wide, like a canyon where grief still echoed. "I cry for mine too," June whispered. "And she's not even born yet." Thomas turned away slightly. "I'm not good at saving people. Never was." "You saved me." He shook his head. "No, I just hate seeing people freeze." He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Before he left, he added, voice low, "But I can keep someone warm. That I can still do." Election in turn, and then he was gone again, into the snow. Inside, June sat near the cradle. The fire cracked. The shadows danced. And for the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she was waiting to be discarded. She felt, somehow, the days began to fold into rhythm. June learned to navigate the cabin like a second skin, where the floorboards creaked. Which logs burned longest? How to coax tea from the jar of dried herbs above the stove. Her body ached with weight. But the silence no longer frightened her. It wrapped her instead like an old wool coat. Safe, familiar, Thomas moved through each day like a man half-tethered to the world. He did not hover, but he noticed everything. When her knife dulled, he sharpened it. When the kettle grew stained, he scrubbed it clean with salt and vinegar. When the hinge on the door groaned, it was suddenly replaced by mourning. But his words remained few. Door won't slam now, wind won't get in. Don't leave the stew pot empty, bears might smell it. Don't thank me, I hate debt. June watched him from the corner of her eye, curious. Every kindness came wrapped in bark. She tried once, over tea. I'm not used to this, she said. People doing things for me. Thomas replied without looking up. I'm not people. That night, the sky turned the color of iron. Wind scraped against the cabin walls, and June felt the baby roll low in her belly, restless. She sat in the rocking chair near the hearth, darning the hem of a borrowed shawl, when she heard it. A sound that did not belong. Hooves. Faint. Slow. Distant at first, but approaching. June's eyes shot to the window. Nothing but black trees and snow. Then Thomas was beside her. No words, no questions. He pulled her to her feet and walked her quickly to the far end of the cabin. He pressed a panel in the back wall. It opened into a small crawl space beneath the lean-to pantry. In there, he said, voice sharp. Take the blanket, stay low. June obeyed, heart pounding. She eased herself inside, tucking her knees despite the heavy weight of her stomach. Thomas shut the panel just as the hooves stopped outside. She could not see him, but she could hear. The door opened. Cold rushed in, then a voice, gruff, unfamiliar. Looking for a girl, pregnant, white, late 20s, might have come through this way. Thomas's reply was low, even. You see a woman out here, she's not pregnant long. A pause. We got reason to believe she ran this way. We're paid to bring her back. I'm not paid to talk. You live alone? Now I remember why. Boots scraped the floor. June held her breath. You mind if we look around? I do. Silence again. Then a second man's voice, more cautious. He's got a damn axe by the door. She ain't here, Thomas said, and if she was, I'd say the same thing. Now leave before the wolves start wondering what you smell like. Another pause. Then retreating steps. The door creaked, closed. She waited. 10 full minutes passed. Then the panel opened. Thomas stood there, jaw tight, axe still in his hand. They're gone, he muttered. For now. June crawled out, shaky. Her eyes stung with held-back tears. Amy, they'll come back. Yes. What will we do? He met her gaze. We leave. Before the next snow. I know someone. She looked up, breath hitching. Where? Old woman. Knows herbs. Lives near the river pass. Owes me nothing. Which means she won't lie to me. He began gathering supplies, moving fast now. Knife, rope, blankets, a small pouch of dried meat. Why are you doing this? June asked softly. Thomas paused, looked at her for a moment that stretched like a bridge across two broken lives. Then he said, gruff as ever, because I don't leave fires to go out on their own. He handed her a scarf. Wrap up, we ride at dawn. And just like that, the walls of the cabin, once so safe, so still, became too small for what followed next. But June understood. The fire he had lit that first night, it had not burned down. It had just begun to move. The wind had shifted. Before dawn broke, Thomas packed. No sound but the soft thud of supplies into canvas, the clink of a tin pot, the creak of wood under his boots. He moved fast, silent, focused. June stirred from the makeshift bed, clutching her belly as another pulse of pressure rolled through her spine. What's happening? She whispered. He did not look at her as he pulled a blanket over her shoulders. We're leaving. Now? His eyes flicked to the window. They'll come back with more men, more questions. June tried to rise, but faltered. The weight of the child bent her low. I can't move fast, she said. Thomas glanced at her, jaw clenched. Then I'll move for you. Without another word, he scooped her up, wrapped her in furs, and carried her to the wagon. He placed her gently on the straw bed he had made in the back, then tied the cover down over her like he was wrapping something fragile the world had no right to touch. The wagon rolled out through the trees, wheels muffled by snow. They moved in silence. June lay there, heart hammering, one hand on her belly. The baby kicked as if knowing something dangerous trailed them. She peered out through a slit in the canvas, catching glimpses of frozen pine, ice-coated branches, and Thomas's stiff back as he drove. At one point she asked, voice cracking, "Where are we going?" "To someone who does not ask questions," he said. "Someone who once saved me when I could not save anyone else." The day crawled by, sun hidden behind gray clouds. They stopped only once, for water. Thomas brought her a canteen, helped her sit up, said nothing when she trembled, just wrapped the blanket tighter and moved on. By nightfall, the forest thinned, revealing a stone chimney rising from behind a hillock. Smoke curled lazily upward. A small cottage sat beside a river, surrounded by brush and willow trees. An old woman stepped out before they reached the gate, as if she had known they were coming all along. She was small but unbent, her eyes sharp as broken flint. "You brought the storm with you," she said to Thomas. He nodded once. "And the fire I need to keep lit." She looked at June, eyes flicking over her belly, her pale cheeks. "You did not make her this way." "No. But now she is yours to guard." He said nothing. The woman stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the house was warmer than it looked. Dried herbs hung from the beams. A stew boiled gently on the hearth. The woman laid June on a cot by the fire, hands careful but sure. "She's close," she said. "The child wants to come soon." Thomas stood nearby, arms crossed, face unreadable. "They'll find us, won't they?" June asked. "They'll try," the woman replied. "But this is my land, and I see the steps of guilt long before the guilty arrive." She handed Thomas a hot cloth. "Boil more water and sharpen your axe." That night they came. 3 men, loud, armed, faces familiar with cruelty. The woman stepped outside before they could knock. "We're looking for a girl," the leader said. "White, late 20s, pregnant." The old woman tilted her head. "Funny," she said. "I see only wolves and wind tonight." The man frowned. "We were told she came through here." "I see no one," she said again. "But I do see a man with hunger in his eyes, the kind that leaves stains on land and soul." The second man stepped forward. "We don't mean trouble." "No," she said, voice like a whip, "but you carry it anyway." Silence stretched. Then Thomas appeared, just past the light, standing in the shadow of the trees, axe in hand, shoulders squared. He did not speak. He did not have to. The way he held the axe, the way his eyes burned, not with rage but with warning, made the men falter. "Maybe she went the other way," one of them muttered. The old woman smiled. They turned, muttering, boots crunching the snow. Inside, June watched from the shadows. She turned to the fire, her heart thudding not from fear, but from something else entirely. That night, as she lay beside the hearth, she whispered to the child inside her. "He stood like a mountain," she said, "and they turned like dust." And outside, beneath the moon, Thomas stood watch, silent, still, and unmovable as stone. The wind howled like a woman in mourning. It slid through the cracks of the old stone house, brushing the floor with fingers of ice, rattling the shutters like ghost knuckles. But inside the fire burned high, casting wild gold light across thick beams and ancient shelves, lined with jars of herbs, dust, and stories. June was on the bed, knees bent, breath ragged. Sweat beaded her brow, mingling with tears she did not remember crying. Her hands gripped the woolen blanket beneath her like it was rope, keeping her from sinking into something vast and dark. Thomas stood nearby, stiff and pale. His shirt was damp with sweat, his knuckles white where he clutched a cloth basin. "I do not know how to," he started. The old woman cut him off with a sharp look. "You keep the trees standing in storm. You keep fire alive in a broken stove. You keep wolves away from something worth protecting." She placed a hand on his chest. "Tonight, you keep her." He nodded, mute, then knelt beside June. "I'm here," he said. "That's all I know to be." June gritted her teeth through another contraction. "That's enough." The old woman worked with quiet precision, hands never trembling. She whispered in a language neither of them spoke, laying out cloths and herbs, checking the baby's position, boiling water on the hearth. The wind screamed louder, slapping the windows. June's body buckled again. She cried out, one long guttural sound torn from someplace ancient. Thomas caught her hand. It surprised them both. "You're not alone," he said. Her eyes locked with his. In them, she did not see fear. She saw stillness, like trees that had withstood centuries. "Breathe with me," he whispered. She did. Another contraction, another wave of pain. Her hands dug into his shirt, pulling, anchoring. He did not flinch. He held the basin, he lit another candle. He pressed a cold cloth to her burning forehead. "Tell me what hurts," he said. "Everything," she gasped. "Then give it to me," she sobbed. Not in pain, but in trust. Thunder cracked overhead. The fire flared as if answering. The room felt both impossibly small and larger than anything she had ever known. The old woman leaned forward. "Now, girl, push." June screamed. Thomas did not move. Another push. She nearly blacked out. And then, a sound. Not wind, not fire. A cry. Sharp, piercing, fierce. The child was born into this storm between two people who had never asked for anything but were given everything in a single, screaming instant. The old woman lifted the baby, cleaned and wrapped her in cloth, placed her against June's chest. "She's strong," the woman said, "like her mother." June stared at the tiny face, slick with life, eyes blinking into her skin. The baby wailed again, fists balled. June laughed, soft and cracked, but real. She's perfect." Thomas stood frozen. "She's yours too," June said. He shook his head. "No." But she reached out, took his calloused hand, and pressed it to the child. "She was born because you kept the fire burning, because you stayed when no one else did. You held the storm back long enough for her to come." His breath caught. The baby stopped crying, eyes drifting open. "You kept the fire for me," June whispered. "Now I'll keep her, for us." For a long time Thomas said nothing. He just stood there, the storm wailing outside, a child breathing beneath his fingers, and something like warmth rising in his chest that hurt more than any axe swing ever had. He smiled. Almost. The cradle was finished by dawn. Thomas had carved it from pine, sanded it smooth, and etched flowers along its curves, simple wild blooms, the kind that sprung up near riverbeds in spring. It was sturdier than the old one, made to last through winters, through weight, through time. He placed it beside the fire, then stepped back, rubbing the ache in his shoulder. June came in with the baby cradled against her chest, a blanket wrapped tight around them both. She paused at the sight. "You made this?" He shrugged. The old one squeaked. June ran her hand over the carvings, eyes misting. "These flowers. I used to pick them with my mother. Before, everything. She'd want the child to see them again," he said, turning away, his voice flat. That night, June hummed lullabies she had not sung since childhood. The melodies were soft and strange in the air, like ghosts returning to the world. Thomas sat nearby, sharpening a blade, eyes half-lidded. He never joined in, but he never laughed either. He was always near, silent, steady, and never farther than the next breath. Then one afternoon, the dogs began to growl. Footsteps approached. "Wagon." Thomas stepped outside, axe in hand. June stayed in the shadows, heart thundering. 3 men dismounted. The one in front held a paper. "We're looking for a runaway. White woman. Gave birth recently. Her brothers put up a bounty." Thomas said nothing. The man stepped closer. "We were told a woman matching her lives around these parts." Thomas raised the axe, slowly. "She's a criminal. She's a mother." The man smirked. "You hiding her?" Thomas's eyes turned to steel. "You want her?" he said. You'll have to take me first." Something in his stance shifted, not just defiant, but something darker. A weight to his frame, a storm behind his calm. The kind of threat that came not from words, but from men who had nothing left to lose but one small light they'd sworn to keep alive. The man hesitated. The second rider nudged his shoulder. "Not worth it. He's serious." Thomas did not move. The men mounted again, casting glances back, but they did not stay. When it was quiet again, June stepped out from the shadows. She held her daughter tightly. She looked at Thomas, really looked. The worn lines in his face, the weather-beaten coat, the calloused hands still wrapped around the axe handle, and the eyes, not cruel, not soft, but burning with something no man had ever shown her. Loyalty. She walked up slowly. "You didn't have to do that." He looked away. "They weren't worth the fight." She smiled gently. "You are." Thomas said nothing. She stepped closer. "You're not just a roof," she whispered. "You're a hearth, a place, a shelter." He furrowed his brow. She touched his arm. "You're home," she said softly, "even without a roof." Spring melted the last of the snow. The cabin stood taller now, expanded, reinforced, its roof patched and extended with fresh timber. A second window let in golden light, and beside it a new shelf held herbs June had begun drying. The cradle sat near the hearth, polished clean. A wooden table, built by Thomas, bore small notches where spoons had landed too hard, and laughter had followed. They had returned, not just to the woods, but to a place they could call home. Thomas still rose before dawn, still chopped wood in the silence, but his axe now rested beside toys he was carving. Tiny animals, little horses and bears, the kind a child would one day name. June nursed the baby by the fire. The girl, now months old, had Thomas's quiet gaze in her mother's mouth, always forming small, determined sounds as if she had a story to tell. The village nearby, once a name spoken only in caution, had begun to send word. An invitation, a festival, a fire. At first, Thomas resisted. "We're not people for gatherings," he muttered. June had smiled. "No, but she might be." So they went. The ceremony was simple. A large fire, circled by stone, surrounded by faces lined with weather and time. Children danced. Elders told stories. Bread was passed around in cracked bowls. June was invited to speak. Thomas shifted beside her, stiff in a clean shirt. The baby slept against his chest, wrapped tight in a woven sling. She stepped forward. Her feet felt heavier than usual, not with fear, but with memory, the kind that needed steady ground. She faced the flames. "My name is June," she said. "Once I was sold by my own blood." Murmurs. "I was shackled. I was silenced. I ran not because I was brave, but because the child inside me kicked so hard I thought it was begging me to fight." She looked toward Thomas, then back at the crowd. "I was not saved by a hero in shining armor. I was not rescued with promises or poetry." Her voice steadied. "I was found by a man who said little, who cursed under his breath and never smiled much. But he built fires. He left meat on the table. He sharpened knives so I could feed myself, and he stood between me and those who wished me gone." She touched her chest, not with speeches, but with shelter, with warmth, with a cradle carved from loss. The fire crackled louder now. He'd never told me I was safe. He simply made it true. A hush fell. She stepped back, and in the silence, Thomas stood. He approached her slowly. From his pocket, he drew a small item, a wooden blade, smoothed along the edge, carved with a single word, hope. He crouched beside their daughter, placed it gently into her tiny hand. "She'll outgrow it," he said, voice rough. "But she'll remember it was sharp once." The baby blinked up at him, the carved word resting in her palm. Later that night, they returned to the cabin. The fire crackled inside, slow and warm. June rocked the baby, humming softly. Thomas sat nearby, carving a new piece of wood, his brow furrowed and focused. Not because it was difficult, but because she would hold it one day. That was enough to make it holy. Outside, snow began to fall. Quiet, unhurried, but it no longer carried memory, only silence. And that, finally, was peace. If this story touched something quiet in your heart, if you felt the snow, the fire, the weight of silence, broken only by love,